Mama and Barney, Part 1. They all lived happily ever after. Kissiah Kid Smith was born on January 16, 1817. She entered this world on the wings of grief and loss just a few hours after her father's passing. Her name would become a prayer whispered in anguish and a curse muttered in dark corners when at 17 she became the Sin Eater of Mount Pisgah, Kentucky, not by choice, but by necessity. It was a role she inherited when her mother, a hard and broken woman, passed with a slice of bread clutched in her hand and the sins of another lodged in her chest. "You're the only one left, girl," the elders had said, their eyes refusing to meet hers. "You'll carry on, won't you?" Kit didn't know how to refuse. Life in 1834 Mount Pisgah was hard enough without carrying another's sins, but Kit Smith, like the ground under her bare feet, took what was laid on her and just kept going. The first time she stepped into the role, the widow Granger led Kit into the cabin where her husband Amos lay cold and stiff on the table. A small loaf of cornbread rested on Amos's chest, along with a clay jug of whiskey. She knew what was expected. She'd watched her ma do it 100 times. Kit's stomach churned as she sat beside the body, her trembling hands reaching for the bread. She felt the weight of 100 secret sins in every bite, the petty lies, the grudges, the midnight transgressions no preacher's prayers could cleanse. The whiskey burned like fire in her throat, and when it was done, the widow whispered, "Thank you," as if she'd saved Amos from hell itself. Word spread quickly. She was Kissiah Smith, the girl who ate sins. Families came to her in the dead of night, each seeking to unburden their loved ones and themselves. The food they left was her payment, a ham hock, a basket of apples, or sometimes just a few biscuits. It was enough to keep Kit alive, but barely. With each ritual, she felt the weight of the community heavy on her shoulders. It wasn't just the sins of the dead she carried, it was the guilt of the living, their secret relief that someone else bore the burden. Over time, she became a figure of suspicion. Children whispered about the strange woman who dined with the dead. Mothers pulled their skirts tight when she passed by, as though her presence alone might bring a curse upon their homes. Once, little Annie Doyle dropped a bushel basket of fruit when she saw Kit coming down the lane. Paradise apples from her family orchard went rolling everywhere, while Annie ran home sobbing about the sin witch. Kit just kept walking, but the sting of the words followed her all the way back to her cabin. Yet there were moments when, in the stillness of a mourning family's grief, Kit glimpsed something sacred. A widow's tears easing her heartache, a father's hand resting on his grieving son's shoulder. They needed Kit, even if they couldn't love her any more. At night, Kit wrestled with the sins she had taken into herself. She dreamed of Amos Granger's bloodied fists, of Mary Colton's whispered confession of infidelity, of the despair that drove young Jacob Haynes to end his life in the woods. The sins didn't just fade, they lived inside her, carving out pieces of Kit's soul. She wondered if what she carried would send her to the same hell she was trying to save others from. Was she cleansing their souls or sacrificing her own? She stopped attending church, certain the walls would collapse if she dared to cross the threshold. One autumn evening, Kit sat alone on the rocky bluff overlooking Mount Pisgah, the world below painted in gold and red. She thought of her ma, who had carried the same burden and died a bitter, hollow woman. Was this her fate too? To live a life no one wanted? To become a ghost long before death claimed her? And how far back did this way go? Would it end with her, or find another to haunt, like a bloodline curse? As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Keziah made her peace with her role. She wasn't a holy woman, nor was she a monster. She was simply a vessel, a bridge between the living and the dead, between sin and redemption. But she also made a vow. She would carry the sins of others, yes, but she would not let them consume her. She would write them down in a book, a ledger she kept hidden beneath the loose floorboards of her cabin, a testament to the humanity of the people who left those sins behind. Kissiah Kit Smith, the sin eater of Mount Pisgah, would not vanish into the shadows of this burden. She would remember the brokenness, and in remembering, she would reclaim something of herself that had gone missing when she took her first breath, the day her daddy died. Kit learned early that some burdens aren't chosen. They're passed down, from parent to child, from family to scapegoat, until the line between guilt and innocence disappears. Kissiah Kit Smith was my great, 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 great grandmother. And though Kit herself would fade into the past, the weight she carried never really left this family. As a 4-year-old little girl growing up in the Deep South in the panhandle of Florida in 1961, it never occurred to me that Mama had a life before I was born. As far as I knew, I was the center of her universe. I never thought about my father's life. Why would I? From every perspective, that of a child in the 60s and now an adult many decades later, he was absent from my existence. It made sense that I was absent from his. But Mama's story would one day shape everything I thought I knew about her and myself. I didn't know it then, but Daddy's story would one day do the same. It was 1950 in Rock Island, Illinois, and Mama had just started getting supper ready for 5-year-old Bunny and 3-year-old Barney when Glenn busted through the front door. Red-faced and boots slamming hard, he pulled up the living room rug and started tearing the house apart. The girls were sitting at the table, so Mama left her work at the stove to shield her babies from this new chapter of their daddy's madness. "Get over here and help me, Darlene. G-men are coming," he hollered, his eyes wild with panic. "What are you talking about, Barney?" That had been Glenn's nickname since he was a kid, a name that stuck, though didn't always suit the man he'd become. "We got 1 hour to clear these guns out of here before they come and cart me off to jail. Get over here and help me." Mama married Barney in 1945 when she was 17. By 1950, I was still 7 years away. But everything that was happening here would one day become part of my story. After my grandfather abandoned their family when Mama was 11, she turned to Richard for comfort. When he and Dickie Lee died and her world went to hell, she needed something to hold on to, something to quiet the pain that wouldn't let her be. Glenn Alfred Barnhart, a.k.a. Barney, was there to pick up the pieces, or so it seemed. Barney lived on his family's Missouri farm most of his life, but by the time they met, he was working as a flagman on the railroad, keeping the train safe as it moved along the tracks. Made him feel important. Life on the farm had been way too predictable and way too hard. The endless rows of corn, the clatter of the chicken coop, the same sun rising and setting over the same fields, it was all a prison. When Barney was old enough to get a job, he did. He liked the money, but working on the railroad meant going places, meeting people he'd never have known back in Putnam County. The whistle of the train, the rumble of the tracks, it made him feel alive. The last thing he wanted was a life of plowing fields and raising chickens. He wanted excitement. Life on the rails gave him that. So Barney left the farm behind. But some things you can't escape, no matter where that train takes you. Barney's route passed through Grinnell on its regular run to the Rock Island Arsenal. Iowa's farming communities and Illinois' military production were partners in supporting the troops fighting in World War II. Barney had been given a deferment from military service because he worked on the railroad. He had never been the patriotic type anyway, so staying home instead of getting shot at in a foreign country somewhere across the ocean was fine with him. In the summer of 1944, on a run through Grinnell, Barney found himself at the local Maid-Rite hamburger stand where Mama worked as a Maid-Rite girl. He was looking for a quick lunch. What Barney found was my mama, all 5 feet 9 inches of her. She was standing behind the counter, her thick strawberry blonde hair in a ponytail with what looked like wisps of cotton candy dancing around her freckled face. She was a long, tall drink of water, he later said, and he was going to take a dip. But it was much later, well into their courtship, before Mama heard him describe their first encounter this way. When she told me this story in 1970, Mama said, I wasn't sure if I should feel complimented or commodified, but it proved your granny wrong about girls who wear glasses. I was getting attention from men after all. What do you mean, girls who wear glasses, Mama? I asked. The uncertainty on her face told me she was debating what her answer should be. As it turned out, lots of men were attracted to Mama. Barney was just one of them. But that day, she told me she never thought she's much to look at. Why would she? One of her earliest memories was of her mother, my granny, combing the tangles out of her hair. Granny believed that beauty lay in blue eyes and dark curls, something Mama would never have. Why did you have to be born an old girl? I only wanted boys. Granny leveled this complaint every morning, accompanied by a whack on the crown of Mama's head as tangles were ripped out in frustration that sent her glasses flying across the room. Mama clenched her teeth. The pain in her scalp was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. Even at 6 years old, she knew she'd never be loved like her brothers were. You might think this would make her resent 'em, but Mama loved those boys with all her heart. She said they loved her too, and that was more'n enough. In 1935, the doctor had declared Mama legally blind. Her thick-lensed spectacles brought her blurry world into focus, but they took Granny's complaining to the boiling point. There was never any chance of missing the anger in Granny's voice. Now, with her new glasses, Mama could see it on her face, too. It was pure torture. Men don't make passes at girls who wear glasses, Granny said, twisting Dorothy Parker's words into Mama's heart like a knife. The boys'll never look at you, Darlene. You're too tall, you got straight hair, and you wear spectacles. You'll never get married. You're just going to be an old maid. The words stung more than the tangles being ripped out of her hair. Mama didn't even know what being an old maid meant back then, but she knew it wasn't something good. But I've seen the pictures, and Granny was wrong. Mama was a real beauty. Her cat-eye style glasses framing those big brown eyes sat over a smile that made you stop in your tracks. No wonder the fellas followed her around like puppies. Mama's looks and the feisty spirit that matched her blonde hair and dark eyes was impossible to ignore. She had learned years ago that the gentlewoman ways her mother tried to instill in her would never give her the rush she needed to forget her pain. Mama and Barney were thrill junkies. The excitement they both craved was easy to find when they was together. Cheap thrills that would eventually come at a high price set her on a path she really hadn't planned on. And that path would eventually lead to me. When these and many more details of Mama's history came out into the light, I began to wonder if Kit wasn't the one guiding me there from the start. She knew something about secrets kept in the dark, and like those in her ledger, these were the sins Mama carried. Kit's ledger didn't survive the years, but her story did. It lived on, weaving itself into our family, into the life of her great-grandson and his children, Junior, Darlene, Bill, Jean, and Dickie Lee. Some days I can feel Kit standing nearby, and it's hard to tell where her story ends and mine begins. She's handed me back pieces of my life that were lost along the way, pieces I never had words for. And the only way to make sense of any of it is to go back to Mama.